of that. So last week we had candidate for Senate, Bob Thorpe, so remember this. I guess I'll put my glasses on so I can read. Okay, so, Bob was chair of the Technology Committee, served on the Government, Transportation, and Elections Committees, and done a lot of work with veterans and all that stuff. So, Sylvia's giftedness is in other areas. Sylvia, our guest here this evening, Senator Sylvia Allen, has chaired the Senate Education Committee, served on the Natural Resources and Environment Committee, and the Water and Energy Committee, and the Health Committee. So she's going to tell us about what she is up to, and we will welcome her now, okay?
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here in Payson with all of you wonderful patriots tonight. I'm going to go really fast because I have so many things I want to share with you tonight. And so hold your questions till we're done at the end. Then hopefully we can have a really good discussion. The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next, Abraham Lincoln. That is an absolute positive, true statement. And I'm going to talk tonight a lot about my concern of what I see that's happening in education. President Ronald Reagan also made this statement: our leaders must remember that education doesn't begin with some isolated bureaucrat in Washington. It doesn't even begin with state or local officials. Education begins in the home, where it's a parental right and responsibility. Both our public and our private schools exist to aid our families in the instruction of our children, and it's time some people stop acting as if family wishes were only getting in the way. That is another very profound statement, and I want, when Kathy Hoffman in last November got elected to our school superintendent, state school superintendent position, I don't know about any of you, but I don't know if you knew very well her platform and what she ran on. I didn't. I was very involved in my own election, and we're kind of up here, and I don't remember any of who was the one that was the Republican? Oh my gosh, I know his name.
Frank Riggs.
Frank Riggs. Frank Riggs never talked about her leftist philosophy. She was out making videos talking about what she planned to do when she got into office. And so these last few months I've had the occasion of looking up her videos because of situations and things that were happening, and I'm going, what is the deal? So anyway, one thing I want to talk to you about, get my cards right here. I love the children of the state very much. And it's a long story how I got talked into being the education chair. It's one of the most difficult chairs in the Senate with lots of pressure. But it was because of how much I love our children and the future generations coming up and what I think is going to be best for them. And they are unique, they are individually designed, and have different gifts and talents. They come from different homes, backgrounds, cultures, and religions. Their parents and guardians have the responsibility and the inalienable right to care for their children. Schools should never be in competition with what parents are teaching at home and how they are directing their children. So, found out that suddenly something called comprehensive sex education was starting to be talked about in the last couple of years in some of our school districts in the Valley. And this was something that was on Superintendent Hoffman's platform. And we had a bill that was very controversial, but it was because of a lawsuit that was filed, which I found out was filed at the direction of Superintendent Hoffman to be filed against our state. It was to remove language within our HIV education statute, which in that statute, it prohibited the homosexual lifestyle to be taught in that course. And so the lawsuit was about removing that prohibition. After that, Superintendent Hoffman then had put on the agenda with the state school board to change some of the rules concerning sex education in our state. When I understood this, I've been working with some parent groups, and it ended up about 75 people showed up at the state school board meeting, and we made a statement. And one statement, when I was making my statement, first off, the policy that is made in the state should be made in the legislative branch, according to our Constitution. The state school board and the superintendent's office is is part of the administrative branch. And they take the policies that we develop, they then create rules, and then she administers those rules and those programs within our state. But if there's going to be policy changes, that needs to come from the legislature. That should not be directly done through rulemaking. So that was my first position on that. Second position was what I said here, that schools should never be in competition with what parents are teaching at home and how they are directing their children. I believe that our schools must be as neutral as much as possible when it comes to political, social, and moral issues. More and more, we are moving from the focus on educating the child to socially engineering children and trying to solve every social issue and problem by replacing the family as the foundation of our society. And this is becoming more and more, school is becoming more and more the family, and trying to solve all the problems and determining what they feel children need to learn and be served by that. Family is where we learn our first lessons and direction in building a moral foundation for life, and school used to reinforce these teachings, but today much of our schools teach is a different competition to what parents are striving to do in their homes. Corrie ten Boom was a survivor of a Nazi concentration camp. In her book, The Hiding Place, she tells about an experience with her father. As a young girl, she heard a sexual joke and didn't know what it meant, so she asked her father to explain. He was silent for a moment and then asked her to pick up his toolbox. She tugged at him and said, "It's too heavy." "Yes," he said, and it would be a pretty poor father who would ask his little girl to carry such a load. It's the same way, Corrie, with knowledge. Some knowledge is too heavy for children. When you are older and stronger, you can bear it. For now, you must trust me to carry it for you. I explained this in my testimony to the state school board. I said, young children are not ready for, nor should they be, sexually active. Why would we burden them with that knowledge? Because you see, comprehensive sex education has been developed by the International Planned Parenthood. And it is for kindergarten through 12th grade. And it's because underlying philosophy in that is that children have a right, a human right, to be sexually active. Today, even in our society, children are being sexualized as never before because of the TV and the music and our sitcoms and commercials and everything out there. But school is a place for what, ladies and gentlemen? School is a place to teach our children about their how to develop their minds and how to read and to write and to become literate adults that can function within society, that they can develop their gifts and their talents. That is the mandate for schools. That is what we're to be doing as citizens in providing a public education for our children, is to prepare them to be adults. It is not to get into these social controversial issues and to go against maybe what parents are trying to teach at home about their morality and their sexuality. And so today we really have very good statutes in that talk about abstinence and talk about encouraging kids how to go against, to withstand peer pressure. You know how peer pressure can be very strong on these young kids, you know. And some of these kids, when they when you talk to them, say they feel a lot of pressure because society is pushing them, the programs are pushing them, and the sitcoms. And when you look at what they put on for the youth, what kind of programs for the youth, it is always the youth are being sexually active in that. So they feel a lot of peer pressure. My only point about bringing this up is to try to explain again, in saying that our schools right now are pretty neutral on this, in allowing parents to direct the education, this issue with their children. Another thing that came out, the Superintendent Hoffman is pushing, is talking about the gender dysphoria that is also in the last couple of years, and in talking to teachers, that teachers should have neutral gender classrooms. Again, it should be something that schools should not try to do that. We must be very, I want to impress very strongly that every child is respected, every child is loved, and every child is to not in any way be bullied by any reason. And that we teach that in school. We just have a no bully kind of policy. How we do that is by helping children to understand that they treat others as they want to be treated. And if we do that, if a child has a particular issue that they're dealing with, the other children are taught to be respectful of that, but we don't necessarily get into catering to that, teaching that, and creating then confusion with the other children, if you understand what I'm saying. That's why schools need to be neutral on some of these situations and handle it in a way that respects all homes and all kinds of situations that are going on in every home. When it comes to bullying, bullying is a big situation in our schools because children can be very unkind. But if you look at the studies, children who are overweight and children who have disabilities are bullied at a higher percentage than any other category of reasons for why bullying takes place. And that's why, again, we go back, we can't use bullying as excuse for changing some of our policies in our curriculum. The other thing that I want to talk about is, it's the social justice classes that are becoming more and more common in our schools. And a lot of this is happening through our teachers' development programs. They have to constantly go to development programs where they get more credit, and every year they have to go to these classes. Usually their districts decide what that is that they're going to be doing. And so it's coming through the back door that way, these kinds of things. Well, there's a program that Chandler School District has implemented. It's called Deep Equality and Inclusion Program. It's written by Gary Howard, and if you go and read it's online. You can read his manual, and they want to turn our kids into social justice warriors. They want our kids to be change agents, because then they can go and help the adults to change. And basically, Chandler School District's contract has $2.4 million over the next 5 years for this program and implementing this program within their school district. Part of that is called the Yes Club, and it's Youth Equality Stewardship. A Yes Club is a place to talk about race, religion, LGBT, gender, whatever is important. It's important for youth to have a place that they can express themselves and be understood. Changing the student is important in any school. To change the school, you've got to change the student. They look at everything in the district and community through a racist lens. Not enough to have, this is their words, I'm quoting their words, not enough to have equal opportunity, but must have equal outcome. What they're saying is that, and I hear this all the time on the floor by my Democrat Senate colleagues, they're always talking about how racist we are, and that we haven't rid ourselves of racism, and that racism is very deeply rooted into each of us. We all have our prejudice, and we all have discrimination, and it's especially very problematic within the white race. And they make no bones about it, and they talk about it. And so this class, this Deep Equality and Inclusion Program, they take a look at the district and the community through a racist lens. Not enough to have equal opportunity. So it's not enough that every child has an equal opportunity to go to school to get an education. They must have equal outcomes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure how we have equal outcomes. Does that mean every child must get 100% on his test? How do you do that, that child himself must study and work hard to be able to get his good grade. I mean, how do we have that equal outcome? They say that the reason why some of these children are not succeeding is because of their low economic standards and standard of living. And probably all of this can go into it, but this is the lens in which they look at as they're putting together their program. They do that with the teachers on the academic side, telling the teachers that very important for the white teachers have biases, and they don't know that they have biases, and they don't know how to teach the minorities. And they can't communicate with them because of their biases. Their whole goal is to change society through the schools. Changing systems require changing people, multi-dimensional. Now remember, I started off by saying that about Abraham Lincoln saying if you want to change government, what you teach in the philosophy of the school is going to be the philosophy of the government in the next generation. So that's very true. And so we take away the idea that people are individuals, and instead we put them in groups. And we segregate them into groups. And we make victims out of them. And that's part of the whole social justice program. And it's not about that we as individuals, that all of us have the same opportunity within our country to succeed. We all can get an education. We can all decide what kind of vocation we want to go into. We can all work hard and we can go into that, and we can realize our dreams, and we can own a home. All of that is on the part of the individual to have to realize those dreams, where this is coming from the point of view that our society is not equal because there's not equal outcomes, and they're pushing that philosophy. And so in their own words, I'm reading their words that are in their manuals. They target white teachers because they don't see themselves as racist or culturally discriminate. So have you ever heard the word intersectionality? Intersectionality. Intersectionality. Thank you very much. You're saying it better for me. Just Google that and go watch what that means. And again, it is, after I went through all of this and watched it, all I could think about was that a lot of this is like the re-education camps in the Soviet Union and in China and in some of these countries where they have to get a hold of people and re-educate them and make them think different. And it's through some of these programs. But tax dollars of $2.4 million is being used to set this up. Now, on the other side of it, I'm concerned because just recently at Yale University, an institution where is supposed to be this really premier university, Yale recently formed a committee to establish principles on renaming, and it's called Principles on Renaming, and a committee on art in public spaces. Members of the former prowl the campus looking for buildings, colleges, faculty chairs, lecture programs, and awards that have politically incorrect names. The latter police works of art and other images on campus, making sure that anything offensive to favored groups is covered or removed. So they're out looking for things that might be offensive according to their standard of what history should be. And it's like, in things that I've been reading about the Declaration of Independence is racist. And there's a committee in Salem, Massachusetts. It's coming up to 400 years since the Pilgrims landed in Salem, and they want to have a celebration. And some people there said, no, we should have a mourning about the landing of the Pilgrims. Do you kind of see what's happening in our country, this philosophical divide where people are looking at things through a different lens? And I had Thomas Bigelow, who also goes to Chandler High School, he wanted to start a TP USA chapter at his school, which is a very conservative, constitutional kind of chapter for teens to teach them civics and things. You know what the TP USA is, organization. And he tells on, it's on Facebook, and he'll tell you what he went through to try to get the administration to allow him to have this club. And they did everything they could to stop the club, and so he said when he tried, the day that he was trying to get kids to come up and learn about what was in the club and get them to join, they were being ridiculed by other students. But when they wanted to, when at his school they started an equality inclusive club, the school brought in a band and had refreshments and had a big huge party to start that club off. That just shows you kind of what's happening. It's not being equal, it's not being fair in the way they are helping these kids to be able to decide what they would like to do. My great nephew in a school down there was physically punished for a Trump flag on his backpack. Now, this particular school in Santan, they had Spirit Week, and the last day of Spirit Week was USA Day. So there was a group of kids that showed up on USA Day with a Trump flag and a Trump t-shirts, Trump hats, being proud of the president of their country. And they all got in trouble. And my nephew had a flag on his backpack, a Trump flag, and he was told that he was being disrespectful and made to do 1,000 up and downs. This is where you run up and down the thing 1,000 times, because he's being disrespectful. Well, this caused quite a ruckus down there, and there was one student that ended up getting suspended. And so I wrote a letter to the principal of the school, and I pointed out that these students have a right, this is the president of our country, and they have a right to express their support for him on a day they titled USA Day, and that this was an opportunity to teach the other students that maybe didn't support President Trump to be respectful of the students that did. It goes back to where I started when I was talking about students that might have different gender persuasions or whatever. We are respectful of those students, right? We don't ridicule them, we wouldn't bully them. Well, why are we bullying students who support President Trump? It works both ways, and that's why the attitude in the school needs to be one that this is a neutral place where children can have their beliefs, and that we respect everybody, and we make everybody, and we don't single out people. But my great niece that goes to that school was talking about the next day, they were talking about all these students that got in trouble, and the teacher was laughing and going on about how stupid it is to support President Trump, and these are things the teachers should not be doing. Another teacher, I work with a teacher that is very upset with what's happening in the AEA, the teachers union. And but she was telling me how in her school district that if they know that you are conservative, if they know that you support President Trump, or that if you don't go along with the the flow, that you are really pressured, and it's very difficult. And she said that she turned in a complaint against a teacher who had a voodoo doll that looked like President Trump, and in her class was sticking pins in the voodoo doll. And she turned that teacher in as being unprofessional in her conduct, and she's the one that got punished for that, or got ostracized for that. Now, these are real things happening in our schools that I'm bringing out to you that is a concern, and that should not be happening. And we have some excellent schools in Arizona, ladies and gentlemen. We do. I visited many of them. And our children are getting excellent, many of them are getting an excellent education. But we also have some problems. Some of the problems are that on our NAEP scores, we've been floating along flatlining for about 5 years now. We can see some good things in some areas that we're making progress in, and those are good areas. But still have 57% of our third graders that are not reading on a third grade proficient level. We do still have problems. Do you not think we need to be focusing on these problems instead of spending a lot of money on these kinds of programs that we're bringing in to try to change the thinking of our young people? And instead of worrying about how strong of an education we can teach them, because that's what's going to help them to be successful. And when I was sharing some of my concerns about the sex education programs, we want to have schools, again, where parents are not worried about what they're sending their kids to and what schools might be teaching contrary to them. So I think it's real important, but so far we've been able to hold to our original statutes that we have written right now, and that is my goal to keep that. The other goal is to be sure and take kindergarten through 4th grade out of any of these classes. Our little children do not need to be in these types of classes. Now, if you want to go on Google and find out about comprehensive sex education in California and what is happening over there, then you'll understand what I am talking about and why we're trying to keep our schools in the way that they are now. The other thing I want to, I brought with me this sheet, and you're all welcome to take it. We talk all the time about funding and education. And the funding, this is funding from 2001 to 2019. It's a big sheet, but I'm trying to get everybody, because you hear all kinds of different things, propaganda, you know, that we're still not up to where we were in 2008. You're going to see we're beyond that, because I have here from 2001 to 2019 all the money that goes into our education system. And you are welcome. I printed enough of these. I'm going to pass them around my district. I want you to have it. And Shirley, just pass that over there so that you can have, and you can see how much money the state of Arizona and even the federal dollars, your local property tax, how that all adds up and how much money we're putting into education, so that you know what that is. The other thing that I brought that I'm just going to share with you is everything we passed this year for education funding, and also what we did for the community colleges. I am a really big fan of our local community colleges in rural Arizona. They are vital to our young people and to all of our citizens. Our young people go in tremendous amount of debt. If they will stay home, go to the community college, get their 2-year degree there, they will save thousands and thousands of dollars. And we can also send our citizens to our community colleges for workforce development training. And I'm a big believer in that. And so we were able to get some money this year for our community colleges. And Gila Community College got some money for workforce development. And that's going to help your county here and help your citizens. It was one-time money. We had some extra one-time money. So I'm going to pass this around because I want you to know what we did this year. Shirley, if you want to take this, because I wanted you to know exactly what we've been doing. And I'm working with also, our education funding is extremely complicated. It is full of many, many formulas, and it's just very difficult to understand how we fund education. And I have one sheet, if you want to look at it, that talks about the funding for the different schools in District 6. None of them get the same amount of funding. This is a problem. Our rural schools do struggle more than our schools in the valley, because our schools in the valley, for one thing, they will have overrides and bonds that will be passed, and they have such a large property tax valuation that they get more money than our rural areas do. So we do have problems, and we do need to look at education funding and how we might be able to fix that. And another area is with our special education funding. That is a very complicated formula. And I'm working with a group of stakeholders, and we're going to try to reform how we fund our special education. Not necessarily that we have to have more money in that, but we're going to reform how we're funding it so the money is targeted and gets to the child that really needs it. Now, I also want to cover the different aspects of education in Arizona. Arizona is known as a very strong choice state in education across the country and is oftentimes looked at, and people will come here to find out how we've been able to pass choice. Back in the early 1990s, we passed the charter school bill. And if you ever want to look at the statutes regarding charter schools, I have it with me, and you can look at how charter schools were formed and how they're to function. The idea was they were to be, the idea was to be less regulated and to also be less money, and it was hoped that we could take the district system and reform it in many ways similar to how the charter schools were formed, so that they could run more lean and mean and yet get done what needs to get done. Then we also created what is called the ESA accounts. Oh, let me back up to the charter schools. Charter schools, the state contracts with a charter school entity for the education of our children. Now, the state of Arizona contracts with many different private entities for services. One is our roads. ADOT, all of the work done by ADOT is done by private companies that build our roads, and even the counties use private companies that come and stripe the roads and seal them. And so they sign a contract with the state. If they fulfill their contract, the state pays them, but the state does not run their business. Do you understand what I mean? We don't know how they spend their money, how they invest their money, how much they paid for their equipment or their office, or how much their CEO gets. We don't know that because we're contracting with them for a service. We have private prisons where we contract with the private prison company. Now, when you write up a contract, the state can write up and put all kinds of things in that contract, all kinds of transparency, all kinds we're going to govern this, we're going to control that. Yes, we can do that with any contract the state writes with any private entity for any service. We contract for health care in our prisons. We contract for health care. Access does not do the health care. Access has third-party administrators that go out and take care of the work of what you know, if you're on Access and you put in a claim and all of that, that is done by a third-party private administrator that is contracts with the state, and we only want them to do our contract, but we don't bother with what's going on in their business. You understand? And yet, what has happened in the last couple of years is that for some reason we should be able to know all the business of charter schools, because after all, they're using tax dollars. Well, yes, tax dollars are being used for all of those other entities I just described to you. And if you look at the statute in the way that the statutes were written in 1992, the charter schools are fulfilling their contract. If we, as the legislature, feel that we want to change that contract and we want to put more transparency or this or that or that or this into the contract so that when a charter school signs to educate for us, they know that they're going to be doing that, that's fine, we can do that. That would have to go through the legislature. But a lot of this is very political because here is the philosophy of the left. You have a district school, it's your address that you were assigned to, and that's where you go. And that's where the money goes. And there's no competition, and there's no other choice for parents. When I read you the quote by President Reagan when he talked about the rights of parents, I strongly believe that. The parents have an inalienable right to direct the education and the moral training and the physical care of their children. And I believe that. And choice, I start out by saying that children are unique, and they are different, and they have different gifts, and they have different ways of learning. And not everything fits them. And the parent has a right to figure out an education they feel is better suited for their child to succeed. Because in the end, ladies and gentlemen, it's about the child. It's about, we want that child to be successful, to grow up, to be a strong citizen, to be educated, be literate, to be able to read, to be able to write, to be able to reason, and to know the basics. And so that's what I wanted to say about charter schools, to give you that perspective. The second thing is about the ESA accounts. ESA accounts are called Empowerment Scholarship accounts, and this is something else that Superintendent Hoffman and I started having clearly some problems with. Superintendent Hoffman made no bones about what she felt about ESA accounts. She believes that that child should be going to the school where the address is, and that money should stay there. ESAs are designed where now the parent contracts with the state, and they're for children who have disabilities. And many of these children that have autism, any kind of disability, it's very difficult within the school system, even though our state pays a lot of money, it's very difficult to design an education unique for that child. So again, the parent is the best suited to know what that child needs and what they could do to help that child succeed and learn with the disability that they have. So they can apply to the state for an ESA, and they are allowed to have 90% of what the state per child distribution would be. And then the 90%, part of that 2% goes for administration of the ESAs to the department. The rest goes back into the general fund. On the ESAs, you can apply for one if you have a child with a disability. You can apply for an ESA if you have a child in a failing school, an inner city failing school, or any school that has been an F school continually. And you can apply to have your child get an ESA. Or if you live on a reservation, you can apply to have an ESA for your child on the reservation. And other one is veterans. If you're a veteran stationed in Arizona, you can get an ESA account. Our military children go around to a lot of different schools. Sometimes parents want to keep them at home and just homeschool them. It's better for them. So military can get an ESA. So those are the 4 categories that a parent can apply to get an ESA. The legislature had expanded that in 2017 to say that a parent could apply for any child for any reason. And so then that really, Red for Ed and SOS, Save Our Schools, they got busy, and that bill was signed by the governor. They then got put on the ballot, that was Prop 305, to stop that. They did not want the ESAs expanded. And so the voters voted against that, voted to stop that bill. And so the ESAs were not expanded. We're back to the 4 categories that I just told you about. So this year I had a bill to reform the ESAs because the statute says the parent can buy curricula. Now that's very broad, and the department is very narrowly saying what that is. Now, a lot of those scholarships the parents get, they will use it to go to a private school and put their autistic child in a private school that's specially designed for that particular disability. And those children are thriving in that type of school. They're not being bullied, they thrive because it's designed for them. But there are some parents that want to design the program themselves. And those parents are the ones being discriminated against and having a terrible time within the department getting the things that they want to buy for their child. I got a letter from a mother begging me, please put manipulatives and therapies, and she went down a list. She said, my daughter has cerebral palsy, she is partially blind and deaf, and there's only certain ways that I can, through a lot of feeling, her daughter, and she uses manipulatives to do that. She'll buy Play-Doh and different things, and she's denied those purchases because the department is interpreting curricula in a very narrow way. And so I was trying to run a bill to reform that so that parents can have the, because it's about the child. And to me, if it's anything that a school is using, then a parent should be able to buy it. Another parent got in trouble because they bought a little, it's very small, but it's a little, it's like, it's not an it has therapy music on it, and there's a term for it, and therapists will use it when they're dealing with these children with certain disabilities. Because it's and it's about as big as my palm, but the department said that was electronic, so that she got in trouble for buying that for a child, and yet a teacher in any classroom that's dealing with a child with these issues can use that. So my position is, if it's used in a regular schoolroom, if a school district is able to get music therapy for a child, if the school district is buying manipulatives, etc., and Play-Doh and whatever, then why can't a parent with an ESA account be able to buy that also? That is my position. So the superintendent, even though we went over and over that bill, they kept saying it was an expansion bill. It was not. I could not get her to support the bill. SOS, Save Our Schools, would not support the bill. And so I had to hold the bill because I had 2 Senate members who would not vote for the bill because the superintendent and SOS would not approve it, and they were afraid of afraid of SOS. So what it has led now to many of the problems that parents are having and calling me, and I've never seen this mismanaged so terrible as I have seen it this year, our ESA accounts. Diane Douglas had them, and the superintendent gets, the law says you get up to 4%, and what that is, so if your child gets 5,000 scholarship, the department gets 2% of that, and it can be, the legislature can approve up to 4%. And right now it's at 2%, and it's almost $1.3 million. And her cost with all of her staff is only about $600,000. She still has quite a bit of money. She can hire more staff to help her manage all of these accounts. But parents, so many children have not had their accounts. I don't know if you saw on the news the mother that's been on hold for days and days trying to get through. And there's never those problems with Diane Douglas or Huppenthal when the program started. So we're in this philosophical battle in our state with education. One, the social justice, which we're trying to change and go into the schools and change the thinking in the way that I read to you that's in their program. But there's all kinds of social justice programs that basically is pitting kids against each other. Instead of us coming together as citizens of the United States, all of us together, and all of us respecting one another, and everybody having the same opportunities and the same rights, instead we're dividing ourselves into groups, and we're purposely dividing ourselves and using the racist card and using social economic things and just and anyway, on and on. And so it's very alarming. And what parents, I'm working with a lot of parent groups, they just want their kids to get a good education at school. They don't want their kids to be socially engineered. They don't want their kids to become change agents. They want to be able to see their kids getting a good, strong education, a traditional education that our country's always been known for. And so that is kind of my mission, is that I want to see that we improve education in our state. So with that, I want to tell you that what I just described to you was one of the reasons why I changed my mind about running for my last term. Many of these parents I've been working with had said to me over and over, Senator Allen, please stay in there because there will be a void in the Senate of who would take my place in the Education Committee. And so that was a great concern to me. and that I'm there to try to counter some of the leftist type philosophies coming out of the Department of Education. The other reason is because 2020 is going to be a very, very serious election for Arizona. 2018 was a big wake-up call about the shift in demographics in our state. Our state is changing. Maricopa County is 63% of the vote. And Maricopa County has changed drastically over the last 5-10 years. And I went and saw a presentation by a Dr. Johnson, who it was all about demographics of the United States. Very, very interesting. And you see if I can find some of the things he talked about in my notes here, because I think maybe James H. Johnson, PhD, University of North Carolina. He's a demographer. And so he had 6 different areas. This was at the Commission of the States, which is an education group, and I went to their conference. And they talk about education all across the country and what's going on in all the different states. So he was there talking about this, and women, this is going to be kind of interesting what he said. He had one section called The End of Man. Men, you'd be interested in this too. He said, the first time in history, women outnumber men in the workplace, and men are attending college in even lower numbers. 66% more women enroll. 572,000 more women graduate with degrees than men. 80% of the job loss in the 2008 Great Recession happened to men, he explained, calling it a men's session. Today, 3 times as many men of working age do not work at all, compared to 1969. In fact, since 1969, the median wage of the American male has declined by almost $13,000 after accounting for inflation. And women have moved into jobs that historically were male-dominated. Demographics of our country are changing because women with the median age of Hispanic females is 27, and the median age of white women is 40. So you can see the difference in the demographics there and what that means. Women are waiting longer to marry and to have children. And we're not replacing ourselves. We're having 1.7 child, and we're not replacing ourselves. So there's a lot of change coming to our country. What I thought was interesting about these statistics about men is that this year the Democrat women, along with help from 3 of the Republican women, wanted to bring back the Equal Rights Amendment. The Equal Rights Amendment died in 1982. The Supreme Court ruled that it was dead because they had not been able to get enough states to ratify it. Well, they think, hey, let's bring it back and let's ratify the ERA, because after all, poor women get less money, poor women don't have, they're discriminated against, and you know what? Women is not in the Constitution. It's not. That word woman is not in the Constitution. But go read the Constitution. Men isn't either. The word man isn't there either. Go read it. And what is interesting about the Equal Rights Amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment itself does not use the word woman. It uses the word sexes. Read the Equal Rights Amendment. It doesn't say a word, anything about women. This is just a political propaganda campaign to, again, divide us. Men over here, women over here, this minority over here, this over here. And we're dividing ourselves into groups and into tribes and instead of looking at we're one nation under God and that we're all one people. In a hearing about the English language reform that we were doing for our English language classes, Senator Casada, when a comment was made, well, we want these immigrants coming to our country to assimilate. And he said, oh, no, we don't. We don't want to assimilate. Well, I don't know what his definition of the word assimilate is, but to begin with, we have to be able to control and understand who's coming to our country because we have to have jobs for people to be able to assimilate them into our economy, right? We need jobs, we need health care, we need school, we need education, we need, there's all kinds of things when we bring people into our country that we have to be able to assimilate them into our country, into our system, and to have enough money. And we can't be flooded at our borders with people that we aren't ready to be able to help. And definitely they must learn to speak the language so that we can communicate with one another. And so we are divided, and we've got a lot of challenges. So back to this this change that's happening in Maricopa County. We were able to get, women are doing very well when they run for office. Senator Hobbs got elected. Who was she running against? A man. And Senator Katie Hobbs, she got elected. Who was she running against? A man. So people came to me and said, Sylvia, you can run one more term. You've held that position. You're from Navajo County. We cannot lose the Senate. Please run for your last term, because we are scared that we will lose that seat, because I will be running against Felicia French. And they feel that Bob would be a weaker candidate, because Felicia French came within 500 votes of almost beating him in the 2018 election. Now, this was the reality of what people were saying to me. And they were showing me all the numbers and all the, oh, thank you, you're a doll. Excuse me. The numbers are a big thing going on down there. Everybody is looking at the numbers and going over stuff. The House is just as critical, because we're 31 in the House, 31-29. We can't lose one seat. That's why John is very important that we get John elected. In the Senate, it's 17-13. We can't lose 2 seats. If the majority of this state switches, you will see this state change so fast in a year and 2 that you'll make your head swim. I know, because I know what is introduced on the floor. I know what they talk about. I know what issues are most important to them and what they will push. We have a huge philosophical divide in this country. And when I saw the changes happening so quickly in our education that were of great concern to me as a grandmother of 19 children, I felt that I needed to stay there because, again, I know who's in line to get that chairmanship, and they're part of the problem of the votes in the Senate. They're more moderate in the way that they vote and the way they think. And they will not go against Save Our Schools when it comes to the ESAs. ESAs are about children, ladies and gentlemen. They're good for kids. Why can't we have them? Why do we have to fight against them? Because we want all the power in one place and all the money in one place. That is the wrong way to look at it. Why do we want to go after charter schools who are following the statutes and following how the contracts they were set up, but we want to use envy and coveting and propaganda to go after charter schools because we want all the power in one place and all the money in one place? It's wrong. And I feel that I'm a very good chairman, and I'll tell you why. I want kids to succeed, so I want district schools to succeed. I want to do everything I can to help district schools succeed. And when my superintendents, I work with the superintendent right here in town, come to me, and I have a meeting with them every year, and they say, here's some things you could do to help us. I go to work and I help them. Why? I want the kids to succeed, and I want our schools to be strong. I want charter schools to succeed. And when charter schools come to me, I help them to succeed, because then kids will succeed. When ESA parents come to me and say, help me, please, I want to help them. Why? Because I want kids to succeed. That's what it's all about. And that's why I'm a good chairman. And that's why I need to stay there. And that's why I'm running again. And I hope that you will support me in that. I am the sitting senator, and I feel really bad about term limits. I did not create that. I feel bad. Bob is a wonderful legislator. But I cannot help what the state looks like right now. And I can't help what is happening, but I can help by being willing to try again to run and get the support of my district and hold this so that we can continue to stand up for good constitutional conservative principles that protect people's inalienable rights, protect parents, protect our kids against this onslaught of left leaning philosophy that I think is very dangerous and that we should not allow in the schools. I told parents, I finally went out to a lot of parents and I said, if you sit there and think that the legislature can protect you, it's not going to happen because of politics. You better get involved in your school. You better know what kind of social justice programs they're teaching. You better know what kind of civics they're teaching. You better know that if a parent came to me, or son in an AP class, which gets extra credit, it's supposed to be a hard class, did not do one research paper, spent 1 month on anti-gun, being anti-gun and watching Columbine and how to go out and march against guns and how to get guns out of our society. A whole month in his AP class, that's what they did. The book he was required to read was something like The American Family. It was full of pornography and all kinds of stuff. The mother was livid about what her son was being taught in an AP class in Scottsdale Unified School District. And so I say to the parent, you've got to be involved in that curriculum process. You've got to know what's going on in your kid's class. Now what I'm going to do about that is we're working on a bill to try to help the schools be able to put online, because every teacher knows what they're teaching every day. They have it in a file. And the parents can know that they can walk into a classroom and they can look at that the teacher will show them their curriculum. But we need to tell the parents, curriculum will be available to you. We need to tell the parents, there's a Parent Bill of Rights in Statute 1, in the first Statute 1, and it's 702. It's the Parents' Bill of Rights. We need to move that over to Title 15. Title 15 has a whole list of stuff that are parents' rights when it comes to the education of their children. They don't know about that, and they need to know it. Parents have got to get involved in their child's education and know what's happening and what's being taught and be a voice at the board meetings. And then if you want to come up here and look so you don't think I'm fibbing about what comprehensive sex education is about, here's the book. This is for 10-year-olds. And if you want to see what it looks like inside, you'll be embarrassed. And there's also in Title 13-1507 is about the corruption of a minor. You cannot hand to a minor pornography and all kinds of stuff. You can't corrupt a minor. And yet there's things going on in our schools that they're corrupting our minors over. And so that is going to be put into Title 15 to reference back and forth. You better be careful that when you're doing stuff in school, you're not giving them things that is a felony in the state of Arizona that is considered corruption of a minor. See what? All I'm asking for, ladies and gentlemen, is that we get back to the business of educating our children. Teaching them how to read, how to write, how to do a research paper, read the great literatures of the day, help develop their minds and their critical thinking. Now, that doesn't mean we don't talk about political subjects in school, but it does mean the teacher should be more neutral. If you're going to talk about that some people want gun control, you need to talk about why some people want to protect the Second Amendment and why they want to, right? I'm not afraid for any child to be taught all the issues. Let them think it through. But what I am against is for them to be taught one side of an issue and not be taught the other side. I'm talking about high school now, okay? In high school, our kids should be able to learn how to think, but they have got to have an underlying knowledge of different issues and subjects to be able to critically think them through, correct? If you're only giving one side of it and the emotion of it all, then they're not going to know. The other thing is, I absolutely love our documents, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. They need to be taught those. We have in the Title 15 and in the 4th grade, you're supposed to learn the first part of the Declaration of Independence. Those kids are supposed to memorize it. And our kids aren't doing that anymore because people are saying, well, that's racist. Because in those days, our founders owned slavery. Well, that was 200-something years ago, and we go back and talk about what the world was like then because everybody had slaves, and it was a terrible, terrible thing. And it took... Right. Well, and it took years to get rid of it, right? But many, many people gave their lives to get rid of slavery. Saying that all people are created equal is a true statement. It is a true statement. You tell me a statement that's better than that. That is a true statement. And we should teach that to kids and teach them to respect everybody regardless of who they are and what they believe. They have a right to the dictates of their own conscience to believe certain things, and we respect that. So in school, we just teach kids to respect each other. We can get rid of the bullying. We can respect every child regardless of where they're coming from. But we can't change school into this leftist worldview that some people think should happen. Okay, I'm going to stop there and let you ask questions, and I know you probably have a lot of questions.
I have never heard
Wait a
or
minute.
seen, I have never heard or seen anyone who is as successful, productive, and constructive as you have been.
Thank you.
Talking like you have to fight and justify your reelection. I cannot get over you. We are so fortunate to have you on our team. Really.
Well,
That's it.
I really appreciate that because it was a very difficult decision for me. Being a rural legislator is very hard. We're on the road all the time. Today, I was on a panel, rushed over to Flagstaff to be where the governor, because there's a fire over there. Those people, it's serious. Wanted to be there. It's my district. Came back here so I could talk to you. It's that way all the time. And I'm not getting any younger. And I have a family, and my grandkids are getting older. And I had felt last year that, wow, But, yes, I changed my mind, and I think it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to work hard, and I believe I can give my all to you again if elected. And will do everything I can to continue to bring forth good policy. But thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Okay, another question? Yes.
Glenn's here.
Okay. Do you
Thank
mind if
you.
I sit down just a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for coming tonight. As you know, I haven't always agreed with you, but tonight I felt very comfortable listening to a teacher, a concerned politician, and a grandmother speaking from the heart with honesty, and I've seen a lot. Maybe I got smarter in the last couple of years, but I see somebody that can be supported very easy, and I work very hard at elections, as you know.
Yes, thank
Thank
you
you for
so
coming.
much. I appreciate that. I really, really do. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'd say diddles to what Glenn just said, but
Thank you.
I do believe in what you said, that I think years pass and now we got the public education years ago and the Christian education today, taught things differently than the public school system does today. Seems like today their biggest concern that they teach these kids, the battles they're going to have to fight out there, is all these, the social injustice, sexism, racism, nationalism, heaven forbid, guns and religion, all that. I mean, it's just, that's what they go out, that's what they push out the door, go out and fight those battles. And in a Christian education, and I believe in our past education, it was our human sinful nature is the thing that we have to overcome, being the first thing. And we got it all backwards. And they hear it all the time here, that unless we get back to those Christian principles and faith and things, this is just going to go on being a struggle forever.
Absolutely, and you're so right that when you read what Thomas Jefferson said about education, and in that, I wish I had this was John Adams I'm thinking of, the quote about John Adams where he talked about that religion should be into education to develop a strong moral character in a person. Wow. Because in the end, when we're being unkind to each other, when we have prejudice or whatever it is, it's because we haven't developed a good, strong moral character as far as I'm concerned. Because if we have, we would treat each other as ourselves. We would live that golden rule. And America was founded, I want to talk about liberty. You realize liberty, there's a statement that when liberty dies in the hearts of the people, there's no constitution, no politician, no president that can save it. Liberty's in our hearts, but liberty is deeper meaning than freedom. Liberty is about control over the appetites, passion, and desire. That you are self-sufficient, that you take responsibility for yourself. The greatest liberty in this world is when you control yourself, right? That's liberty. And liberty is based in a moral principle. And when we don't want to take care of when we don't want to be responsible for ourselves anymore, when we want to push that off on government and somebody else to take care of us or somebody else to solve the problem, liberty is dying. And so there's a deeper meaning to that word, and we can't save it if people do not have that in their hearts anymore, that they want to be a republic, and they want government where a moral and virtuous people is the only ones that can have this kind of government, because it's a self-government. We govern ourselves.
The equality and liberty cannot coexist. If you're going to have equality, you don't have liberty.
Explain that.
I don't understand. Well, if you're going to have equal outcomes, you're going to demand equal, then you're going to
Okay.
have to suppress,
Yeah.
those people that are going to, want to do more, want to, produce more, achieve a higher, a greater whatever they're doing. They can't do it. I mean, they're going to be, if you got to have equality, and liberty cannot. You can have equality in face in the law, and you can have equality as far as under God, but you can't have equality in a society.
Equal things or ability. I mean, we're all different. We don't all have the same
That's
abilities. And so when we try to manipulate the system, in Sweden, they try to manipulate the system because they wanted to get more men to be nurses and more women to be this and that, because they were bound and determined on this gender stuff. And it failed miserably. When you let people determine themselves what they want to do, there's just more women that want to be nurses. But what's wrong with that? What is wrong with that? Why can't we allow us to have our differences and yet have the equal opportunity to choose what we want to do, right? That is what we want to do, and that's where we're getting all mixed up. Is there injustice in the world? You better believe it. Do we need to figure out how to solve it? Yes, we do. But we can't do it with tyranny, because some of these things is tyranny when you're going to isolate another race, if you're going to isolate the white race, you're going to blame the white man, and he's the one that's responsible for everything now that went wrong. When they're teaching kids in the social emotional learning, that's another new thing that's coming down, that the patriotic order has been devastating. Are you kidding? We're showing that because children don't have father in the homes. That's one of the things that are harming children. We need fathers in the home. We don't want to have a society where we push fathers out of the home and we push that idea. See, we're all upside down, inside out, and all over. We really are.
Next we have Patty.
Hi, Sylvia. I'm sorry. First off, Dr. Spock screwed everything up. Okay, he did, when he took discipline out of the thing and saying there's a certain way to discipline your children. All of us in here grew up, and of course, in a different generation. But even my own daughter said one time, are you going to let a small child go after a pot on the stove or put their hand over a candle without smacking it? But today the kids know they can call the police and say, I've been, this, and this. The other thing is, with these new people and social media, which Hollywood has gone bizarre, and I grew up in California and know all those areas and stuff, but Hollywood has gone bizarre with their movies. They go around half naked all the time, and that's not class as far as I'm concerned in a movie. We should stop going to movies. Secondly, we should have our children not get a cell phone or be able to play games and stuff at the early ages that they're doing it. And that's the parents doing it. In sex education, I remember they took it out of school because they didn't want to do it. Now you're saying that they're bringing back this so-called sexual whatever it is. The parents should be teaching the sex education, but unfortunately a lot of the parents are probably as promiscuous as what's going on in the schools. And then we have the drugs, and then we have all the pot, you legalize pot, And the pot today is far more powerful, but the kids are starting with it at earlier ages. And I remember in California, okay, in the schools, the young girls were wearing different color bracelets on their wrists to say what kind of sex they'd have with the boys, and that was starting out in middle school. So, I mean, California's corrupt nowadays anyway, but
You ran with a different crowd than I did.
no, I'm telling you, this is when my kids were in school. No, I went to Catholic school, I'm sorry, and I learned all, we practiced, I didn't in school, but anyhow, it was different. But it has to start at home, and these kids, the parents are not educated enough to teach their own kids, and the discipline has to be put back into the schools. I don't know how you agree with that, but hey, everybody else talk longer. Give me a break. Anyway, I worked with kids before. Give me an idea, I'll give you my email address. I talk to a lot of kids today, all different ages, and I'm more than happy to help.
We've got some wonderful young kids coming up. We really do have I've got some great grandkids, and I know all of you've got great kids. We do have some great kids, and we just want to give them the best possible information and help that we can. And I just want to be sure that schools are cautious on that. And so anyway, go ahead with your question.
Ms. Donna.
Okay,
Sylvia, you're doing an excellent job.
thank you.
We need more people like you. I will stand behind you. I'm sure this entire room will do the same thing. I will vote for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I have grandkids coming up in this public education. I'm going to be right on top of it.
Okay. So I was going to say, parents need to be on top of things, and grandparents, talk to your kids. Don't be afraid to talk about these subjects. They know them anyway. It's everywhere. It's the talk that's going on their phone. So you need to be the one to talk to them and be the leaders. He who teaches first teaches best.
Yes.
There's something I want to address real fast before the next question. I had an SCR 1001, which I know you all heard about, and that was a proposal to put on the ballot a reform of Prop 301, which we passed in 2000. It was funded as an education bill, funding bill, created a 6-cent sales tax we've been paying for 20 years. And so in that, I reformed it. Let me talk about the reform piece, and then, the other piece was if the voter would have been asked if they wanted to increase that the other fourth, which would create another $500 million. And so it was a proposed tax increase that the people so voted for. So I want to tell you why I did it, all right? Because I want you to hear it from me instead of what other people think why I did it. First off, I'm going to come back this year and reform Prop 301, because we do have that tax available, and we don't utilize it properly, because there's 9 buckets where that tax money falls into, and some of those buckets have nothing to do with education. It was passed as an education tax, and it needs to be an education tax. One is $77 million goes to tech companies that have labs at ASU. And so these companies get to start up these labs. And the idea was that the state would make money off of all the products they would come up with, but we haven't made any money from that. And these companies have had 20 years to be able to get established and started. And I believe that $77 million needs to go to our schools, because that's what the Prop 301 was about. So I'm going to reform that part. Another bucket went for a tax credit, that people could get a tax credit from the state for low-income people. I'm taking that's like $25 million. Taking that, put that into the bucket for education. There was like character education, school safety. We've put a lot of money aside now for school safety. And instead, we take this money, and now we can give a lot of, so many more millions to the classroom site fund, take rid of the strings that are attached to the site fund, allow the schools to have flexibility and local control, be able to use that money for teachers' raises, for character education, whatever they need to use that for. And then set aside a certain percentage, be 20% would go to the universities for in-state tuition. And then 5% goes to the community colleges for workforce development. So that's how I want to reform it. And that's what I hope to do. I'm not going to have the piece next year that talks about the increase in the tax. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to try to reform how we're using the money today so that more money gets to our class. Now, back to why I did it. There's going to probably be on the ballot this year, because you've heard, maybe you don't because you're up here, but Maricopa County is constantly in the papers day in, day out. The businesses, the teachers, I started to tell you about who elected those women last year and how Sinema got elected. Moderate Republican women voted for him. I mean, that's one thing. They had analyzed the election last year in every way you can imagine. And so education is very important to these women. And when your child comes home with that yearly list of things you've got to go buy for your kids at the first of the year, and you're spending $200 trying to get your kids ready to go to school, what do you think? Schools don't have enough money. That's what parents are thinking. That's what they're being told by the schools, onward and onward. So anyway, so there's a group right now meeting. They want to have a tax on the ballot for education. They say that education is underfunded over $1 billion. That is what they say. And so their idea is going to be asking to increase the TPT tax, the 4th cents, and $1 billion in property tax increase. And they're going to create a new school, this statewide property tax school district, and they will create a new $1 billion through that. Now that's the idea that they're working on. Invest in Ed last year was going to put on the ballot, but it got thrown out by the courts because because of the problems. But their bill would have gone on businesses, increased their state income tax by 90% on businesses to create the $1 billion. So I knew that they were going to be putting something on the ballot for 2020. I am really worried that because of the makeup and what's happening in Maricopa County, that it would pass. I wanted to have something I felt was more fair and equal, that would satisfy this thing that Republicans never want to fund education, and that we don't fund education enough, whatever it was, and that if you're taxed on what you spend, it's not nearly as bad as taxed on what you earn. Taxed on what you earn and property taxes, I think, are horrible. And so this would be on what you spend. If you spend a lot, you're going to pay more. If you're rich, you're going to pay more. If you're poor, you're going to pay less. But everybody should pay something. Everybody should be responsible for education. That was what I thought. That was the reason for that, was I wanted to give a different choice to the voters. Never had the votes to get it off the floor. It never went to the floor. It was all talked about in the media. But it did have one effect. The Democrats were crazy because they were saying, you can't let the Republicans do this. We got to stop it. And so when it did pass out of my committee, because I was able to get it passed out of the committee, the Democrats wouldn't vote for it. And they're the ones that want more money for education. But why? It's not enough. And they want a progressive tax. In other words, they want a tax on the rich. They want a fair and equal tax. So I just wanted to explain that to you, so you heard it from me, the reasons why I was proposing that. I am going to come back and reform 301, because that's how I reformed it in my SCR and my 1080. And I think those reforms are important. I think it'll get more money for education. So I think it's important to run the reform bill, but it'll just be the reform of the existing money and how those monies are distributed. So, all right.
All right, Janet has the last question because we want a little time for,
Okay.
okay.
Okay, so I don't understand this whole graph here, but when I look at it just superficially, from 2001 to 2019, we've doubled all of the money that's spent in education. And yet, earlier you said that 57% of third graders can't read, yet we're doubling the money going into education. All this money going into education is also promoting books like you have on the table there. So doubling the money in education, which I'm all for education, I'm going to read the 1828 dictionary definition of education. We have to stop letting the meaning of the definition of education be scattered, or I don't know what the right word is, but it's to include everything, like you were talking about. It's sex education, it's this, it's socialization, it's all this stuff. And so we've doubled money spent on education, and we don't have the results. So we keep passing all these bills, and nothing changes. So I mean, it's, we keep passing more and more bills on both sides, liberals and conservatives. But where are the statistics that show that doubling funding for education has really been worthwhile? And then, real quick, and it's not against you personally, it's just I'm looking at figures here.
I understand.
So, Noah Webster, 1828 dictionary, education, the bringing up as of a child, instruction, formation of manners. Education comprehends all that series of instruction and discipline which is intended to enlighten the understanding, correct the temper, form the manners and habits of youth, fit them for usefulness in their future stations. To give children a good education in manners, arts, and science is important. To give them a religious education is indispensable, and an immense responsibility rests on parents and guardians who neglect these duties. Kids that can have phones in school, they're not disciplined, they have no boundaries. All these things are in schools now that we've doubled money for. So, I mean, I think huge changes need to be made in public schools for us to really make a difference for children.
And thank you for that, Janet. But I want you to know that change is going to come from the citizens and from the parents in empowering legislators like myself to be able to move forward and get it done, because in the end, I've got to have 16 votes and 31 in the House and the governor sign it. And a lot of that stuff gets so political down there that some of my members won't touch it, because they don't want to go against the established education establishment. And so that's why I'm kind of on the bandwagon, getting together a lot of parents. There's different parent groups, Purple for Parents, Mommy Lobby, Arizona Protect Children Alliance, the International Family something or other. There's a bunch of groups that are forming that just want their kids to be educated, not indoctrinated. And I think that's fair for the taxpayer who's footing this bill to ask for it. When I have employers coming to me and saying, these kids, they can't do the job. They can't fill out the form, the employment form. They can't, it's hard, we can't get them to read the manual. I mean, they're complaining that they can't find workers that can do the work. And that's why we can't put up with this anymore. But I want to end, I know I got to end. I want to say this because I really mean this sincerely. We have some wonderful schools in Arizona. We do. All of my children were educated in the public schools. My kids are doing wonderful things. Got an electrical engineer son that's got 10 patents. I got nurses. I got a fireman, paramedic. I mean, my kids are doing great. I've got grandkids that are coming up. My one grandson became a welder, and he's 30 years old, and he's got a house. I mean, my grandkids are doing, that are coming up, adults, are doing great. We're doing great things in Arizona, but that doesn't mean that we don't have eyes that are open to see the problems that we also have in Arizona. And how do we help the 57% kids that aren't getting there? So we have problems. but we have good schools too, and we have to have the right, proper balance to go out there and solve these problems. I wanted to share problems with you because some of those problems are really alarming parents, and I think taking away from the time that is needed to educate kids to get off on these tangents and these other things. So thank you very much. I've got my petitions. If you would, she'll pass them around. If you'll sign it, if you can, I really appreciate it. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. And you know, Sylvia talked a lot about education. She's also extremely knowledgeable for years and years and years in land and water issues, and she's on the Natural Resources Committee also. So don't forget that, among other things. Okay, so anyhow, Patty just asked me, can I sign John Saline's petition if I already signed Walt Blackman's? Yes, because there are 2 House seats, but only 1 Senate seat. And since there's only 1 John and 1 Walt, you can sign each one of their petitions. As long as you don't go and sign the other 2 candidates that are running against them, the independent and the Democrat, okay? So, anyhow, I would like to introduce to you John Saline. I'm looking forward to getting to know him better. We're going to have lunch next Wednesday, not tomorrow, but anyhow. So tell us just a little bit about yourself, because you are going to be coming back and giving your stump speech, okay?
Thank you.
Just have to get it on the calendar.
Before I start, I just wanted to tell you,
Hold the mic, you need to learn to
I have a
hold the
soft
mic.
voice, so I gotta learn how to do that. Before I start, I just want to tell you, I've known Sylvia for a long time, and she is one of the best assets we have when it comes to education in the Senate and in the House down there. When I get there, I'm going to look to Walt Blackman for help figuring out these things. And I'm going to look to Sylvia when it comes to education, because she knows what she's talking about. And I appreciate everything that she said here today. I'm an attorney. I live in Snowflake, Arizona. I practice mostly criminal defense. I like to call it constitutional liberty defense, and estate planning and other civil things like that. I ran for justice of the peace up there in a small race in 2018 against an incumbent that had been there for a long time that everyone loves, including myself. So I didn't win that, but after that was over, Walt Blackman approached me and said, "John, we could really use your help down in the House. The seat that Bob is giving up is very important, and we need to keep it." I consider myself a constitutional conservative. I consider myself to be a capitalist. Mostly I just consider liberty to be the most important thing that we have. There have been a lot of issues after I decided to run that have come up that I've kind of hitched my wagon to. One of them I think that touches on what we've talked about today, but we haven't really discussed, and that's there's a circular problem here that Sylvia mentioned. She mentioned who was in charge of these producing and pushing these things in our schools, right? She mentioned one company in particular, Planned Parenthood. So the question is, why does Planned Parenthood, who handles healthcare, care about education? And the reason is there's a circle going on here, right? If we can teach our children that sex at a young age about sex education, we're going to have more customers when they come of age, right? And so the circle goes around and around, and that's why they're there. My goal, and I think Sylvia's goal, and I think most Republican conservatives, is we care about liberty, we care about life, and when I say life, I mean the life of children of any age, right? 0, -0, if you want to say that, all the way through. And Sylvia would agree with me. We value life from the moment of conception it has the potential that she's referenced today. Everyone has potential. There's a famous, probably the most famous soccer player. He plays for Real Madrid, whose mother tried to abort him when she was carrying him. She was totally unsuccessful, partially in part because they had very strict abortion laws where he was born. Can you imagine? He's the most famous soccer player. He has a world record for the most Twitter followers. That probably doesn't matter very much to you, but that's a big deal. And can you imagine the potential and the good that he's created in the world that would have been gone, right? So that's part of the reason that I'm running is, another thing I want to ask is, how many of us in here are grandparents of kids that are in school? How many of us in here are parents of kids that are in school? Just me?
Kid.
That's a problem, right?
It's a problem.
That's one reason that I'm running is I'm 39, and I think that the time has come for us to start trying to pull the younger generation up and get them to these meetings and get them to say it is cool to be a conservative and it's okay, even though Hollywood says it's not. So that's one of the reasons that I'm running. We have a huge liberal behemoth over in Flagstaff, and we're going to try and fight against that to say, because if we don't pass on our liberty values, if we don't pass on the value that we have on the Constitution and the original way that it was created and the way that it's designed to operate, if we don't pass that to the next generation, it will go away. And if we don't defend the Second Amendment, right, if that amendment falls, every amendment will fall after it, like clockwork. And I think that's one of the things that Sylvia's talked about today is we have to teach those things. We've got to get the parents involved, and we need them to come to these meetings and come and just be engaged in the political process for our children. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And they're the love of my life, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this. It's not easy. If I'm elected, it means I'm going to have to not work for the first half of the year, at least at my regular job, which will be a sacrifice for our family, but one that we've talked about and prayed about, and we're willing to make because we believe in the ideals that we share as a group. So I'll pass around my petition if you would. I am a Republican running on the Republican side. I will note there is a third person. There are actually 5 people in my race now. Two Democrats, the independent, and then Walton, Blackman, and I. One of them is a Democrat from Joseph City. I always want to say St. John's, but it's Joseph City, who is kind of a blue dog Democrat. So it's good that he's there. He will cause some problems in their race. So. Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you, Tony. We'll look forward to having you come on back where you can share what you think about all of the various many issues that we've got going on.